Okay, so good evening everybody. Let's start off with our motivation and begin by reflecting on the kindness of others whose work in society, whose friendship and help to us specifically, or even the people who have challenged us. Let's think of what we've received from all these various beings and have a sense of gratitude for how their efforts have kept us alive. And have a real sense of their kindness for everything they've done, whether deliberately for us or just in the course of their regular work. The bottom line being that we've received benefit from their deeds, that we couldn't exist without the kindness and efforts of others. And so to let that fill our hearts and feel a sense of gratitude to them, gratitude for them, and a sense of love, wanting them to be happy. And then, of course, the wish to repay their kindness arises, but when we're ignorant ourselves, we can't do a whole lot to repay their kindness. But if we advance along the path, develop our mind, generate all sorts of good qualities, then we'll be able to actually do something that benefits them in the long run. And so for that reason we generate the aspiration to attain full awakening so that we can repay the kindness of living beings most effectively. And so for that reason we're listening to the Dharma teachings this evening. So our friend Tanya sent us a little link today to something, a short video on the web from some kind of science something. And they had done an experiment in which they found that the more people feel gratitude and express gratitude, the happier they are. So I thought this was quite interesting, that what the Buddha taught 2,500 years ago, science, better late than never, has also discovered. And I found that quite interesting, because they really did an experiment showing that. But we can see that, when we really meditate, thinking of the kindness of others and what we've received from people and how our entire life depends on them. I mean, we depend on the people who built this house and the people who made the carpeting and the people at the PUD that give us electricity and the people who made our clothes and grew the cotton and, who grew the food that we've eaten for years and years and years. And when we really think of how our life depends on them and feel their kindness, then a feeling of gratitude automatically arises. And they say then automatically from that gratitude you want to repay the kindness. Okay? And so then, therefore, we feel quite happy. Yeah, when we see ourselves as the recipient of kindness, then automatically we feel happy and we want to repay it. And the more we can repay their kindness by doing things, then again the happier we feel. So I was thinking that when you talk about the different paths and levels of the bodhisattvas, the first of the 10 levels is called the very joyful. Yeah, and that particular bodhisattva perfects the practice of generosity, of giving. Yeah? And that giving makes them so joyful. And I was thinking, well, yeah, that's exactly it. You feel the kindness of others, you have gratitude, you want to repay it, you give, then you're very joyful. Yeah? And so that's kind of the opposite of the advertising industry, which tells us we're going to be more joyful the more we get. Yeah, that we should always get for ourselves. And yet our whole experience is that we get a lot of things and it doesn't fill the empty hole in our heart, and we always need more, we always need better. But when we practice giving, then that feeling of loneliness in our own heart kind of automatically goes away. Mm-hmm. So it was a very cute experiment. They had given people a test, first of all, to kind of test their base level of happiness. And then they asked them who was a person who's influenced you a lot in your life. And, write something about that person. So everybody, wrote about it. One person, it was their sister, somebody else their mother, somebody else a college professor. Everybody had somebody different. And they wrote about that. And then the person doing the experiment said, now we're going to call them. And you're going to read what you wrote to them. And they were looking like, oh, and then it filmed them as they, were reading their letter, which they didn't know they were going to read, telling their feelings about that person, and you can see in their eyes and their facial expressions, how meaningful this was, and how surprised the person on the other end of the line was to get this kind of phone call. And then afterwards they gave them another kind of test to see their happiness level, and it had increased by 19%. Yeah. So it really it makes a difference. And then they said even if they didn't express their gratitude, they just wrote it but they didn't call the other person, their feeling of happiness still increased, not quite as much, but still increased. So I thought, well, that makes perfect sense according to the Dharma. That's what our teachers have been telling us for so long now, and if we try it out, we can see it from our own experience. Okay, so we've been going through this text, the 400 stanzas by Aryadeva. It's divided into 16 chapters, and we're currently on chapter 7. Yeah, so we're a little ways into the text, so some new people, may not know what's going on. That's okay. You'll listen and, you'll benefit in your own way from it. So this particular chapter that we're on right now is talking about how to overcome attachment to sense objects that are the cause of so many afflictions. And in specific, last week we were talking about creating karma to bring, that results in having sense objects. Yeah? And that the last verse we were okay, let me just review the last verse that we did. It was talking about if ordinary people ever perceived like the state of cyclic existence as it really was, that they would probably faint. And I was saying how it really takes a lot of purification of mind and creation of merit to be able to meditate and gain some deep understanding of the situation that we're in, such that we can see it clearly without being overwhelmed by the truth of what we saw. Okay, because even though everything looks so dazzling and sparkling and wonderful around us, if we examine things more closely, it's not actually that way. Yeah, we're all taught that we're, if you do X, Y, and Z, you'll have happiness, and having these kind of possessions, doing these kind of activities, this is what we're all supposed to do because people see this as happiness. But when we really examine the situation carefully, it isn't. Yeah, I mean, how many truly happy people do we know? Yeah? I mean, we may know some wealthy people, but are they truly happy? Or we may know some people with incredible prestige, but are they really happy? Yeah, we may know some very successful people in their own field, but are they, inside themselves, really happy? Or, is everybody kind of running around on wild goose chases, trying to get the things they think are going to make them happy, but, wind up feeling kind of shortchanged at the end? Any of you ever done that? Yeah? Ran around, I want this, I need this. And you get it, and then, okay, now what? Yeah. Okay, so we were on verse 166, and this is talking about the rarity of going from happiness to happiness. So, in cyclic existence, we take one rebirth after another, and what we're reborn as depends on our karma, in other words, on our previous actions. It's not chance, it's not the design of some kind of external creator, but we created ourselves the causes for the experiences that we undergo. So, verse 166 is that it's rare to go from happiness to happiness, in other words, from one good rebirth to another good rebirth. So Aryadeva says, people without pride are rare, and the proud have no compassion. Thus, it is said to be very rare to go from light to light. Okay? So, even Joe Blow, our little questioner here, is but being belonging to the highest socioeconomic group is, and having the finest possessions is known as happiness. Yeah, isn't it? In the world, that's true. Yeah, and so that's how Aryadeva respond. People without pride are rare, and the proud have no compassion. Thus it is said to be very rare to go from light to light. So in other words, having seeing this thing that being in the highest socioeconomic class, having fine possessions is known as happiness. Still, it's appropriate to have aversion for that kind of result. Now, worldly people are going to go, huh? What do you mean that's happiness? Why should I have aversion for it? And so Aryadeva explains that people who have worldly pleasure and status and comfort and everything like that, and who are not inflated by pride, are very rare. Okay? And it's true, you know, people who are very rich, people who are very famous, the sports stars, the movie stars, the politicians, very easy to get inflated. Yeah. And we can't just put it all on them that they're inflated, but we look at our own lives, and whenever we have some kind of worldly success, it's like, you know, we stand up a little straighter and look at me, you know, I won the contest for the best bonsai plant, or, you know, whatever it is we're into. Yeah, I won the baking chocolate chip cookies contest.
I bought the boxes at the library.
Yes, you did. Aren't you wonderful? Yeah. So we can easily inflate ourselves. Okay. So people who have good things, who don't get inflated, are very rare. And when you're inflated, you know, and full of conceit, then it's very easy to create a lot of negative actions. Yeah, we put other people down, you know, because we think we're so great. We gossip about them. We lie to protect our reputation. We can easily exploit and mistreat people because we begin to think that all the rules don't apply to us. Yeah, that's quite common for people who are successful. Now, the rules don't apply to me, and even if they did, I have friends in important places who can fix the situation. Yeah. And actually, another scientific study they did, you know, this thing that we have about mirror genes, or mirror neurons, you know, that give us the capacity to feel empathy for others. They say that in people who are very successful, the mirror neurons don't operate so well. Isn't that interesting? You know, so I would think that, you know, you get proud and stuck up, and your ability to feel empathy for others decreases. Whereas often when we go through difficult situations, you know, our feelings of empathy and compassion for others can really increase because, you know, we're humbled a little bit by the situation, and we can open our eyes and our hearts and see what other people are going through. Okay, so those who are conceited think that they're the best ones, and with envy they want to crush their equals and the people who are better than them. So they lack compassion, and with that kind of attitude, then they create a ton of negative karma, and so in their future rebirths, instead of having a better rebirth, they have a lower rebirth. So that's why it says it's very rare for those people to go from light to light, from having one good rebirth to another. Okay? So to really consider that. And it, you know, and when we really think of that, there's a few things that get pointed out. One is, it's a warning to ourselves not to get puffed up when things are going well. Okay, because the puffed upness would just, you know, takes away our virtue due to the way we act. And it also makes us aware of not being jealous of people who have that kind of societal success, because they have it this life, and then due to the negative karma they so often create, because they're conceited, then they don't have it in future life. You know, and so that their situation is very unstable, and they have suffering coming their way, but they have no awareness of it, and so don't change their actions. But, you know, why in the world should we be jealous of those kind of people? Yeah, it is interesting sometimes when we get jealous to really think of the situation of the person we're jealous of and what kind of karma they're creating. And, you know, would we really want to exchange places with that person? Yeah. Okay, then verse 167. Is repudiating attachment to higher rebirths attained through abstaining from misdeeds. Okay, so Joe Blow Joe Blow is this person who asks questions in the text. Some of them are good questions and some of them aren't. So Joe Blow says, though the proud are, we can, how do you pronounce this word? Deprecable? You can not depreciate, but deprecable. It's not a very good word. Okay, but there are people who you don't admire. Okay, so the proud are people who you don't admire because they get because they engage in a lot of misdeeds. But it's appropriate for people without pride to strive for upper rebirth. Okay, so Joe Blow is saying, okay, I agree with you. These people who are arrogant, they're not despicable, but can't think of the word right now. But they're not worthy of honor. Yeah, because they create so much negative karma because they're arrogant. But people who aren't arrogant can still try and create the causes for upper rebirth, and they should try and do that. Okay, you getting what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Yeah? Okay, so Aryadeva says, whoever renounces them now will, it is said, obtain sense objects. For what reason would such perverse practice be considered correct? Okay, so what this is talking about is, when we think about attachment to the happiness of this life and how that attachment to sense objects and pleasure and everything often makes us act in unethical ways to get the things that seem so glittery. Yeah? Okay. So, and thus we want to abandon that attachment to the happiness of this life, give up the attachment to the sense objects, and by doing so, it's said that then we create a lot of virtuous karma because we become more generous, we're not as self-centered, we're not as stingy and miserly. Okay, so you're creating some good karma, and many people have the idea, when they practice generosity, their motivation, because they believe in karma, is to have a lot of sense objects in their future life, a lot of pleasure. Yeah? I mean, it's true, isn't it? I mean, there's some people, if you look, what are the three levels of motivation? The first level is to have a good rebirth with pleasure in next life. So there's some people who don't strive for liberation or awakening. They just want a good rebirth and they want to be rich. And so they practice generosity with that kind of motivation. There's a lot of people like this. You look really puzzled, but there's actually quite a number of people who have that motivation for practicing generosity. And sometimes it's the first motivation that actually gets us going, because we think, oh, liberation, enlightenment, that's so far away, I can't think of that. But next life, gee, I would really like it to be more comfortable and happier and have better health and more amenities and things like that than this life. So yeah, I'll go for that. So it makes sense, yeah.
Does it burn down after a while?
But that's what we're getting at. Is, you may give up attachment to sense objects this lifetime in order to practice generosity and ethical conduct. But if you have the motivation and you're doing it so that you get pleasures in next lifetime, then what use is that? Because you get those pleasures, then you become the arrogant one and you stop creating the good karma. So exactly what you said, you get some kind of pleasure, but it is impermanent, it disappears. And if you're giving up the sense objects now because you see that your attachment to them gets you involved in all sorts of, unpleasant and illegal and unethical actions. Why in the world would you want to have all those things at your fingertips with a selfish reason in your future life? Because then you'll use them in the wrong way and create more negative karma for yourself. Okay, you getting what I'm saying? Yeah. So he says, it's said that those who promise to be chaste in this life for the sake of a high rebirth in the future, and who renounce sense objects, will have whatever attractive objects they desire, and they'll take a higher rebirth. Okay, so they have that motivation, they create that karma, they get the good rebirth. Okay, if with wisdom we give up the things that we have, in this life, it's perverse to seek them again in a future life. Yeah, kind of dumb, isn't it? Yeah. So if you are practicing non-attachment in this life because you see that those things don't bring ultimate happiness, then why in the world do you want to get them in future life where you can so easily get attached to them again? And what do you think they're going to do for you if already this life you've seen that they leave you flat? Okay? So why would the wise consider this correct? It's unreasonable to seek what we've deliberately renounced. Okay? So this is quite a good response, for people who are accumulating good karma with the motivation for future lives. Of course, you have to teach them that or explain that to them at a certain point when they're ready and receptive to hear it. Yeah, if you explain it too soon, then they get very, very confused. It doesn't work. Okay, the next verse is repudiating the accumulation of karma for the sake of possessions. So we're going through a series of verses now where that are refuting the idea of creating good karma so that we can have a good rebirth. Okay, so even though on the first level of practice our aim is to have a good rebirth, this specific chapter is moving us beyond that to, wanting liberation from samsara, and so wanting to give up, even a good rebirth and accumulating good karma just so you can have a good rebirth. Yeah, it's like, I'm on this merry-go-round, and let's get on a better horsey next time. But you're still on the merry-go-round. Yeah. Okay, so 168 says, wealth, the result of merit, must be thoroughly protected from others. How can that which must be constantly protected from others be one's own? Okay, so even the wealthy shouldn't be attached to their wealth, which is the result of virtuous karma, because you always have to protect your wealth from thieves, from fire, from flood, don't you? Whenever you have whatever you own, you have to protect it, because people can come along and take it. Yeah? Anybody here who's never had anything stolen from them? Yeah? You all had things stolen from you at one time or another? Small things, big things? Yeah? Anybody here who's never had things that you really like get lost or get damaged? Happens all the time. Okay, maybe we haven't lost things by fire and flood. Yeah, but I'm wondering with the new building, are we going to lose it by fire or by the fire system working and flooding the whole place? Yeah. Okay, so how can anything needing such diligent protection be our own exclusive property over which we have control? Now you think about that. Everything we own, we have to protect because it could get lost, it could get stolen, it could get destroyed. So how can things that we have to look after and take such good care of with such diligence, how can we think of them as our own exclusive property over which we have control? Because if they were truly ours, and if we really had control, we wouldn't have to jump through so many hoops to protect them. Okay? So, though the effects of virtuous actions have been accomplished, they can't benefit us as we desire. So we may, do virtuous actions to get wealth. We may get wealth in the next life, but those things can't really, provide us true protection from our suffering. Yeah, because rich people suffer. Yeah, famous people suffer. Attractive people suffer. It's, none of those things at the end of the day really can protect us. So we need to constantly expend effort on the account of our possessions. And that's, instead of spending that much effort to, what he's saying here is, he says, we need to constantly expend effort to constantly expend effort on their account is like the sustained effort required to cultivate a spiritual mentor. In other words, we have to put forth so much sustained effort to protect our possessions that we might as well put forth that much effort to create a good relationship with a spiritual mentor, because that's something that can really benefit us in the long run. Okay? I remember one time, can't remember if I went to this talk or I just heard it afterwards, but the Tibetans love all these little, where's my cord now? Oh, here it is. Okay, so everybody wears these protection cords. Sometimes you have big, little packets and things that you wear, and different strings and stuff that are blessed by lamas, and people grasp onto these. I want a protection cord. I want the cord. Give me one. And and the lama's saying, when you get a cord, you have to protect it. Because, if you don't tie it properly, it's going to fall off, and, you shower, and so the color fades, the dye fades out of it, and after some years it wears off, and it wears out, and it breaks, and so he was saying, if something you have to protect so much, how can that thing actually protect you? Yeah, because what he was doing is pointing out, people's superstition about, this physical object is blessed, so it's really going to protect me. I saying, if you have to protect it, how's it going to protect you? Yeah. So then you might say, well, why in the world, I'm saying this, why in the world am I wearing one of those cords, that I have to protect? The cord has significance. In the middle of the cord, there's one kind of knot that represents dependent arising and emptiness. And then when you tie the cord around your neck, the two ends are compassion and wisdom. So if you use the cord as a physical object to help you remember dependent arising and emptiness, that helps you remember compassion and wisdom, then in that way it can serve some useful function, because it is reminding you of the qualities that you want to develop and of the things that are really important for you to remember. So in that way, it can serve a good function. But just thinking that the substance of the cord itself is going to protect you is that's fairy tales. Yeah. Yet it's incredible. Sometimes when you go to these events, like when they do long life initiations or something, and they're passing out long life pills or passing out, any kind of substance, people go nuts. They go totally crazy in India. If you've ever been there, I mean, you could get there could be a stampede to get these things, which is completely the opposite of, what the teachers are teaching. But oh well. Okay. Then, verse 169 is about repudiating the accumulation of karma out of attachment to worldly practices. Okay? So, Joe Blow says, if practices like giving are wrong, first of all, they're not wrong. Okay, he's talking about, he's misunderstanding the thing. But if practices like giving are wrong, we should follow conventionally accepted practices. Yeah? So Aryadeva says different social customs are termed religious practices. Thus it seems as if society has more influence than religious practices. Okay, so adherence to worldly practices that people in the world call religious practice is also unsuitable. Okay, so the term religious practice is applied to different social customs, like giving away and taking a bride. Okay, so in ancient India, giving away a bride, taking a bride, this was said to be a religious practice. This is true in our own culture, isn't it? In the Catholic Church, marriage is a sacrament. Yeah, marriage is a social custom, but it's been made into a sacrament. Yeah, having a baby is a biological function, but then you do a baptism. So many religions do baptism. Okay, so it's interesting to think of what kinds of social events are there that then people make into some kind of religious practice, and make it, sound, oh, look at the Crusades. Yeah? Joining the army and, fighting to recapture the Holy Land is all of a sudden killing people, killing the heathens is a religious practice. It's actually just social custom done out of, politics and economics. Okay, but people made it into some kind of holy thing whereby, this is a religious practice to go and reclaim the Holy Land or to conquer the heathens and kill them all or whatever it is. It's interesting to think, isn't it? Can you think of other things?
The terrorists are kind of along that line.
Yeah, some of the terrorists too. Yeah, what they're doing is a religious practice. It's not. Yeah. So there's many things that aren't religious practices, but society, terms a religious practice. Yeah, and so Joe Blow's saying, well, if giving is just going to lead to good rebirth and that's not so useful, then let's do these social practices because, at least then society approves of us. Yeah, we'll get some status of it. So such conventions are called religion, but they change according to place and time. Yeah, it's therefore improper to be attached to society which doesn't remain stable, even if society may appear to be more influential than religion. Yeah, and nowadays, isn't societal practice more influential than a religion? Yeah, it really is. Consumerism is our religion, materialism. Yeah, .com, get whatever you can. Yeah, yeah. So, these are all, it was interesting actually because Martin Luther appeared, at about the same time as the Industrial Revolution. And Catholicism was kind of saying, well, it's not so good to to be stingy and have a lot of wealth, and you should practice generosity. And then Luther came and said capitalism is great, and made it into a religious practice. Protestantism, one reason it became so popular was that it really supported capitalism and the Industrial Revolution. Yeah, we always think people believe in religion because of what the religion says. Yeah, people believe in religion so often, not because they've learned the religion and think about it, but because it fits with what they want to do anyway. Yeah, and so that's why religion so often through history is used to manipulate people. Yeah, and so this is, this happened too. Okay. Then verse 170 is repudiating the accumulation of virtuous karma for the sake of attractive sense objects. Okay, so Joe Blow says, pleasure doesn't occur without attractive sense objects. Since they're the result of merit, it's permissible to perform virtuous activities out of attachment to attractive objects in order to have pleasure. Joe Blow's asked this same question so many times in the past 7 chapters in different forms. Have you noticed? Yeah, the same question, always trying to find some way that attachment is really good. He's really seeking the religious stamp of approval on attachment. So he keeps on asking this question. So verse 170 says, through virtue there are attractive objects. Such objects too are considered bad. By giving them up, one will be happy. What need is there to acquire them? Okay, so when it says through virtue there are attractive objects, so yes, through being generous, good ethical conduct, and so on, we will get attractive objects in future lives. Such objects too, when it says they're considered bad, it doesn't mean that the objects themselves are bad. It means that possessing them is not going to be good for us. In the sense that we will get arrogant, we will become miserly, we will do a lot of negative actions to procure and protect these possessions. Okay? So by giving them up, one will be happy. And it's interesting, we hear that and we go, no, by giving up my possessions I'm not going to be happy. Yeah, but it's quite interesting. Sometimes when you do give things up, there's a real sense of freedom because you no longer have to take care of them. Yeah, and I remember when I lived in India, there was, I knew some older nuns who were quite poor, and they lived in this, one older nun in particular lived with her sister in this little hut made of mud bricks with a tin roof made of, they have these big ghee cans, and you cut up the ghee cans made of tin and put that on the roof. Dirt floor, little kerosene stove. They asked me over for tea one day. They're dirt poor, yeah, but they're so happy, they're so free. I mean, they made tea, they were joyful, they had the little Tibetan kapse, which are, real treats that they were saving not for themselves, but for guests. I always save the good things for myself and give the things I don't like to the guests. And they're doing exactly the opposite. They have much less than I have, and they're very happy. Yeah? So sometimes you look at it and giving things up can really, you don't have to protect so much anymore. Yeah? And, your heart often is a lot more open when you don't have so much because you feel really in touch with other people, with what they're going through. Okay, so though attractive sense objects are attained through virtues such as giving, those desiring liberation disparage them because they are the root of futility and are impermanent and the nature of being unsatisfactory. So it's true, disparage was the word I was looking for, but yeah, okay. So, though attractive sense objects are attained through virtues such as giving, those people who desire liberation don't care about this, or they disparage those sense objects and getting them by practicing virtue, because they're the root of futility. You know, you get them and then you just have to give them up when you die. They're impermanent, they break, and so on. They go out of style. And they're also the nature of being unsatisfactory because they can't really solve all of our problems. So if we become happy and virtuous by giving up a source of faults and misery, what need is there to acquire it again? Okay? So, if we give up attachment and our mind becomes happier, we create more virtuous karma. Then, why do we want to, again, possess the things that trap our mind in craving and clinging? Okay, then the next verse is repudiating their accumulation for the sake of power and wealth. So you see all these things of, because the mind keeps thinking, okay, well, maybe that's a bad reason for getting wealth, but this one's a good reason. Oh, well, that one's not so good. Well, this one's a good reason. Okay, so this time, Joe Blow says, though sense objects should be disparaged, we should create merit for the sake of worldly power, which is a source of superlative pleasure. Okay, so, okay, Joe Blow's saying, yeah, creating virtue just to get sense objects, yeah, that's not so useful. We disparage that. But worldly power, if you can be a political leader, if you can have some worldly power and authority, that is really going to, give you the ability to be happy. That's what he's saying. So verse 171, for those not in need of authority, practices for that end are meaningless. Whoever strives for authority is called a fool among humans. Okay? So adepts, spiritual practitioners who have gained mental control, they can effortlessly accomplish whatever they desire. Okay? And so for those people, practices such as generosity for the sake of obtaining worldly authority is senseless. They aren't interested in it. Okay? Whoever strives for the authority of mere verbal dominion or verbal domination is a fool, because power is futile. Okay. Now, do we really believe this, that power is futile? No. Power, I want some power. If I have power, then I can get this person to do this for me. I can get that person to do that for me. I can get these possessions. I can, I can arrange all my duckies finally. Yeah, because I have worldly power. And Aryadeva is saying, actually, worldly power, it's really, it doesn't cut it too, because you have worldly power one year and then you lose it the next year. Yeah, and it's true, isn't it? People in our society have a fantastic reputation one year, next year, reputation's gone. Yeah, Ted Cruz made a lot of noise and got written up in a lot of papers, and some people were like going, whoa, he's really great. And now a lot of people are disparaging him. Worldly power, worldly fame, come, go, go. Okay? Yeah, so seeking that, seeking worldly power and thinking it's going to really make you happy, and for that reason giving up the opportunity to develop yourself spiritually, is really very sad. Yeah, because this internal spiritual practice is what can actually bring us happiness and satisfaction in the long term. It can make us much happier than fleeting worldly power can ever make us. Yeah? And we can also look around and see that people who have worldly power also receive the most criticism. Don't they? Because when things go wrong, they blame those people. Yeah. So again, it's really kind of thinking that that's going to do it for you doesn't make much sense. 172 is repudiating the accumulation, again, of attractive sense objects out of attachment to subsequent wealth. So here's Joe Blow again asking similar question. He's saying we should do meritorious actions since we want their effects of wealth in future lives. So we already refuted that. He's coming up with the question once again. Okay. So Aryadeva very patiently says, with a view to future effects, you grasp at practices out of greed. When you see the future outcome, why are you not afraid? Okay, so with the mind saying, oh, I want good things in my next life, I want to be rich, I want to be famous, I want to have this and that and the other thing. Yeah, so I'm going to do these meritorious actions to get it. So we're grasping at all these practices to get their results out of greed. But then when you actually get that future outcome, why aren't you terrified? Because now you have the power. And people with power with worldly power, create a lot of negative karma. They do a lot of unethical things. We look at military soldiers, oh, they're a general, so powerful. They create so much karma from killing. Yeah? So if you see that future outcome of getting that kind of power, why aren't you terrified? We look at people who had so much power in the world. If we look at Mao Zedong or Stalin or Hitler, or so many people had incredible power, and where are they reborn? You don't want to even think of their rebirth because they created so many negative actions that it's not going to be a good rebirth at all. Okay, so why are you not afraid? If you grasp at practices such as giving out of greed and attachment, you'll have to experience many bad rebirths as a result of that attachment and the actions that we do because we have that attachment and craving. When you see that the future outcome of craving and attachment is bad rebirth, aren't you afraid? So in that sense, in that case, what use is clinging and attachment? And then he says, it's like buying a place that makes you miserable. Yeah? And how often do we get a place that makes us miserable? Yeah, we work and work to get some kind of worldly something. We get it, and then we have problems. So all of this, he's spending a long time just cutting our attachment to worldly pleasure. Yeah. And it's not just so that we go, oh, all the things I thought are going to make me happy don't make me happy, woe is me, what's the purpose of life? That's not it. The purpose is, by freeing our mind from this attachment, then we have the mental space to ask ourselves, well, what really does bring happiness? And what really is a state of peace? And what really is liberation? What is going to be some kind of stable state that is not going to disappear on us, that is going to be fulfilling? Yeah, and that's where we really have to turn to spiritual practice, because it's only through spiritual practice that we can get that kind of joy and happiness and internal peace. Why? Because external things, their very nature is change. They change. They're unstable. You can't hold on to them. Our internal qualities, when we cultivate internal qualities and get to a certain level on the path, then these qualities cannot diminish. Okay? And when we realize the nature of reality, then we cut all these disturbing emotions and disturbing attitudes. We cut them out of our mental continuum altogether, and then we really have peace. You know, there's no more anger inside of us. Wouldn't that be nice? There's no more jealousy or arrogance or craving or clinging or laziness or resentment inside of us. You know, so if we do that internal work, we can really arrive at a state where there's internal peace and satisfaction, and that is worth so much more than having a gorgeous house or being rich or being famous or whatever. So that's the reason why he's going through this again and again and again. It's not so that we feel, oh, you know, everything's hopeless. What I thought was going to make me happy isn't. It's so that we then start looking for what really is the cause of happiness. You know, and then you look at somebody like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who's been a refugee since he was 24 years old. Yeah? Now, been a refugee, his people undergoing, you know, genocide and the destruction in his homeland. And he's a happy person. Yeah? And when we look at many people who've gone through incredible hardship in their lives, but because they practice the Dharma, they're genuinely happy people. Whereas you meet people who haven't gone through much hardship, who are actually quite miserable. Yeah? So, you know, the real key is the internal development. That's the important thing. Okay. Are there questions or comments?
I just have one thing, I guess, with this last verse. It seems like if you do actions with a good motivation, you get a positive result.
Yeah.
But because of that good motivation, you then would not do such a negative thing with it.
Yeah, right. Yep. But see here, the person is they're creating some virtue by having some renunciation, but it's done still with attachment to samsaric pleasure. So that attachment to samsaric pleasure is being enhanced. So then when they get the good result in the next life, there's the attachment to it. And then, you know, you create all sorts of negative karma to procure and protect it. Okay? So there's different levels of good motivation. That's what we're getting at here. Yeah, that the motivation of just giving up attachment with the 8 worldly concerns to the happiness of this life, it's a good motivation, but in the end it's not sufficient because it's just going to recur in the next life. But when you talk about, like, you know, that's why we try and always generate the compassionate motivation of attaining full awakening for the benefit of all beings, because if we motivate like that and dedicate like that, then the good karma will ripen in that way, and you get good things, you know, along the way in samsara. But because your motivation is for enlightenment, then, you know, it's less likely that you're going to misuse those things once you get them. Okay, so I was thinking, here we're going through all this thing of, not creating virtue out of attachment to samsaric happiness and accumulating a lot of possessions for that reason. But if you have a bodhisattva who really wants to benefit others, then they may, they'll create virtue that they dedicate for awakening, and they will get material wealth as a side product, and then they use all that material wealth to benefit other sentient beings and to create more virtue. Okay? Yeah? So bodhisattvas who have a really pure mind and a really correct altruistic intention, they can have worldly power and worldly success and worldly wealth, but they're not going to use it in a negative way because they've done enough purification beforehand. Okay? Yeah? Yeah.
And also in that context, what do you make of all those practices, like, I don't know what, the wealth generating practices?
Okay, yeah.
I've never been to one, I just always thought it was skillful means, but...
Yeah. Okay, so these practices for generating wealth, certain reciting different mantras or initiations or things like this. I think if you're a true practitioner, then those are done definitely with a bodhicitta motivation to benefit other sentient beings, and then any wealth you accumulate is used directly to benefit sentient beings. Yeah, and you can see if you're a bodhisattva and you have a really virtuous mind and you have wealth, you can do so much good. I'm thinking of the bhikshuni in Taiwan, Venerable Cheng Yen, who started out quite poor, and she, she did a practice where she made one prostration to each syllable of the Lotus Sutra, and people began to see lights coming out of her retreat hut. Yeah, so she had some kind of realization. And then people would come to her for help. And she, one time somebody came and they were bleeding, and she took them to a hospital, and the hospital wouldn't admit them because they were impoverished. And so she made a vow, I'm going to change this situation and do something for the poor so that they can receive adequate medical care. And so then, any donations she received, she started accumulating the wealth, and she had, first she constructed one huge hospital, on the eastern coast of Taiwan. And then what she was doing became more and more popular. Now it's an international organization called Suchi, and they do they do all sorts of work around the world to benefit people. It's really quite incredible. So all the wealth that people gave her, because of her spiritual realization, she just used to, create this amazing organization that, when there's a natural disaster, her people are like right away assessing the situation. They get teams of people on planes and they go there, and they have, articles. They take, the water bottles that are such a waste, and they have a way of recycling them to make these really soft kind of cozy blankets, and they take them to areas where there's been national disasters. And it's a whole incredible network, and they really use technology quite well. And so, there you can see, okay, somebody with a really virtuous motivation, if they have wealth, can do so much good for others. Yeah?
And Venerable, something I learned when I was staying with a person who's her student that I stayed with. But from the other side, she's also completely focused on trying to help those wealthy people generate merit.
Yes.
It's not just helping the poor.
Yes.
It's helping the rich.
Yes. Yeah, helping the rich not to cling so much and not to be so miserly.
Yeah. And that's part of the mission.
Right.
It's,
Yeah. Yeah. To help the rich as well. She does very good job at that. Yeah. Other comments or questions?
We've been talking about generosity at in Spokane at the Unitarian Church for the last number of weeks, and I guess listening again tonight, it just strikes me how difficult it is for us to let go of the idea that this is where our happiness lies, even if it's not something that's really precious. I mean, like, it's not something really luxurious or something, but something that we imbue with our preciousness. Those things that we can't let go of too.
Yeah.
So we just had a conversation last week about a woman who's been keeping a lock of her grown daughter's baby hair. And she had quite a story about how this came to be and how but it was the color of the hair that she loved, and that she's really working on letting it go and giving it to the birds. But somebody else in the class was like, no, don't do that.
What's wrong with keeping it?
What's wrong with keeping it? But what struck me was also just that we so kind of relate to hanging on to those things that making us happy.
Right.
But even the thought of somebody else after they share how precious it is, we don't want them to lose their happiness either.
Yeah. And yet what use is holding on to a lock of your daughter's baby hair going to do you?
Right. But,
Yeah.
I mean, it's hair.
Yeah. And how often does she take it out and look at it?
Right.
Yeah.
But just we can't get over that it's not, the happiness isn't in there.
Yeah. It's quite difficult for us.
So hard.
And I wonder if when she looks at that lock of hair, if it really makes her happy or if it makes her melancholy.
Yeah, right. Quite melancholy.
Good.
Because it is no more. That child is no more. You as a young mother are no more. You're old, child's old. Yeah. And yet hanging on to it.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew that attachment to hair because I had hair down to here before I met the Dharma, and no way was I going to cut it.
The other thing that kept coming up too was that attachment like that really has us dwell in the past in a state of mind that no longer exists. So not even being in the present, can't be in the present to really give from your heart because there's so much of living in the past.
Yeah. Yeah. Last night I told you about Guy's wife who, is her cancer's gotten much worse and she only has a few weeks to live. And today they sent out an email saying, because a lot of people have written them such warm messages and, kind of sympathizing messages. And Guy was saying, there's this one charity that Valerie really likes. And he gave the name of the charity and the thing. And he said, make an offering to that charity and they have a thing where they can then say, notify Valerie that it was made in her honor. And she said that will make Valerie very, very happy. And I thought, wow, that's really good, isn't it? She's dying of cancer. What's going to make her happy is money being given to a charity for something that she really believes in. Yeah. So, it was good. I thought very, very good. Okay. We're almost done with chapter 7. Next week, should finish it.